Hi, and welcome to another episode of Smuggling Hope. On today's episode, me and my wife are going to talk a little bit about what we've learned from our experiences of marriage and realistically, like how to direct our attention to prioritize our marriage so that we have, as best as we can, the kind of full and life-giving marriage that we want, right, that many couples want. So, talk a little bit about our experience of marriage, what has worked for us, and really like break open, I guess, some concepts for married couples to think about, especially those with children, how to maintain a romance with your spouse and to prioritize that time. We did shoot this one on location, and we had like a little bit of problems with power, so the audio and visual, there's a little disruption in the taping. So hopefully you can manage through that. But I think it's a great way for you to, meet my wife and also kind of have an understanding of kind of some of the things that we actually do as imperfect disciples. So we are trying to practice what we preach as best as we're able. So for you guys, you can enjoy the video if you want to watch it on YouTube. If you're already a subscriber, thanks. If you haven't, go to YouTube, subscribe, or on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe. It helps us to reach a larger and larger audience. The more that people watch the videos or listen to the podcast and share the podcast or download it. We try to keep these things under an hour so that you can listen to them on the way to work. And by the time you come back from work, hopefully, if you're on the way to work and back, maybe you've gotten through a whole episode. So we really want to deliver authentic Catholic content, but also we want this to be meaningful. We want to be able to provide Catholic counsel to the community in a balanced and informed approach. We want people to feel they are learning something worth sharing, and so that they can, in fact, smuggle hope into their workplace, into their homes, into their school, into their relationships. So again, keep your interest in your questions coming. We try to respond to those. And again, super, super grateful for all those that support and listen to the podcast every week. Continue to do that as best as we're able. So for you guys, before we jump into the episode, a couple words from those that have supported the podcast. Number one is the online marriage program at heartsrenewed.org. So if you go to Hearts Renewed, you're going to find a modular at-home marriage program. It is not a marriage enrichment program. It is a marriage transformation program. The people that do this course, which again, you can get through it in a week. You can take your time and get through it. Most people, if they do the whole course and they do it in a leisurely pace, they can finish the whole program in 90 days. This is all the stuff that marriage counselors and marriage therapists and people, they just don't talk to people about. And so I compiled all of the research about what works and also made sure that it was consistent with the Catholic faith. So you have, an authentic Catholic approach to working with your marriage. And so many people are taking that program as a way to, obviously deepen their connection to their spouse or overcome decades of marital discord. Right? They've been struggling with communication, or they've been struggling with figuring out, why does my husband or why does my wife do this, or why do we struggle with blah, blah, blah. We've got people taking that course. They've been married for decades. We've got people that are, pre-married that are taking that course. And again, the goal is to produce more and more attractive and remarkable marriages so that people see marriage and they desire it for themselves. Children see their parents loving each other. And so that we can have that civilization of love, but also that we can inspire people. And, again, marriage is the cell of society, just like there are cells to a body. Marriage is the cell of society, as St. John Paul II would say. Where family goes, society goes. And right now, marriage is discarded. It is not understood. And obviously in the Catholic faith, we are having a real big problem with priesthood, but all priests come from families. So again, if we can embolden and produce remarkable holy marriages, again, we're going to have remarkable and holy priests entering more and more into the church. So again, wherever you are, you can check that program out. Again, if wherever you are, right now you can try that program just for $1. You just type in the code RENEW1, right? That's in the show notes. So if you're on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Renew One, type it in. You can get that program you can try it for a full week for $1. So again, really low cost risk. I mean, if you're looking at like wanting to find a solution to a marital problem, you're going to probably find it in that program. If not, email me and I will generate more content for that program so that that program meets your need, or I'll generate an episode of this podcast. Want to interact with the audience, and we want to provide you with resources that, for whatever reason, people don't access or people don't have, mind you. So again, I want to be very, responsive to people. The second, support of this podcast is, the Chesterton, family of schools. My kids go to the Chesterton Academy of Buffalo. Why do my kids go there? Well, because I wanted my kids to have an education that teaches them how to think, not just to teach them how to be a consumer, right? So majority of schools teach your kids just how to get good grades so they can get into good institutions so that they can just buy more stuff. So if you're an anesthesiologist or if you're sweeping the floor of the local gym, you just are a better consumer. We want people that are whole people that are taught to think. And classical education, which is what Chesterton offers, allows people to be ministered to and taught at the level of their character and their spiritual life and the formation of their intellect, right? So it's very different than traditional education in terms of the mainstream, or even if you have kids in a private educational setting, check out Chesterton schools, right? And that's something that I will put in the show notes. If you're looking for a Chesterton school in your vicinity, or you want to start one, they're popping up all over the place because people do want a change in education. And for the most part, the educational system seems to be falling apart. I'm not saying that it's all, gone, but it doesn't seem like it's producing what it used to produce. And so we really want to, we want people to know that there are other options, right? So again, check out the online program, or check out, Chesterton schools. If you are in Buffalo, if you're in Buffalo, New York, check out Chesterton Academy of Buffalo online, and check out what they have going on. Check out what the student life is like, and I think you'll definitely be impressed. So I'm going to pass it on, and we're going to start the show. If you notice that I'm sweating profusely, it's because it was probably 96 degrees when we shot this. I don't know why my wife doesn't sweat, but unfortunately, that's something that the good Lord has blessed me with. So I hope you enjoy the program, and if you find it relevant or helpful, again, please share it with somebody that you think might benefit from it. Thanks. Okay, welcome to a special episode of Smuggling Hope, and I am on location with my lovely wife. She has we've been married for 17 years. She and I have 7 kids together, and we still like each other. So we decided to take some time and pause and reflect on our marriage and our relationship. And I had been trying to get her on the podcast for a while, and she said the only way that she was going to do this is if we were in the Caribbean. So
I may have said that in jest.
In jest, but figure that this would be a good opportunity for people to meet you, for the audience to meet you, but also for us to kind of talk a little bit about maybe why it's so important and why it's so hard for people, especially people with a lot of kids, even a lot of little kids, whether they're young or whether you have 1 kid or 10 kids, why it's so important to kind of really prioritize your marriage and take that time really to, for your marriage. And so I guess like for you, like Shannon, like what would you say, like, why is it so hard, you think, for people to really prioritize their marriage?
I think for me, you'll have to excuse this. It's a little bright out here. So I'm either going to squint or have a little visor. For me, it's the mom guilt. Like I always feel, I don't know, there's a very good part of me that just wants to be a good mom and, make sure my kids are taken care of and put my kids first. But I sometimes, even by leaving like on a date night or even sometimes just an after dinner walk with you, I just, like, oh, I could be doing something else with the kids, or, there is that struggle for me. So I think personally I had to realize if I made intentional time with the kids, then I wouldn't feel as guilty when I did take time to prioritize the marriage. So maybe the guilt came from, well, I wasn't being intentional about my time with the kids, or so I'd sit down and think, like, I spent this amount of time with this kid and I did this and I did this and I already did this. So why am I feeling guilty? It's not a good type of guilt. But if I was just, spending all my time ignoring them, I think that would be a normal conscience prick. But so I just had to make sure I was being intentional about my time with them so that I could give you the time that you deserve, that we needed for our marriage.
I think like it's
Does that
hard
make sense?
because yeah, to be like intentional, I guess, with the time with the kids because then there's less guilt. I think like for me, like a lot of times the temptation is to get pulled, I think, more outside of the home too, and then not necessarily. Sometimes I think as guys, sometimes we don't have, I don't know, like it takes us a little bit of a learning curve to know how to transition to home and be plugged into like our families and things. And sometimes it's a greater temptation to kind of, okay, well, I can go back to work, or I should work more,
Right.
working more. Or some people have a lot of ambition. They want to build more things or they want to do more things career wise, which is not a bad thing. But if it's pulling you away, I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy to kind of get into positions where you're not really taking care of yourself. You're not really doing things that, feed your relationships with your children or your wife. I think so. So I think that's a huge thing. Where a lot of times, I think that there's always like different demands and things. What do you think it is that like that you've seen that we've done, or that that was really made a difference, so that we didn't get kind of burned out? Because again, like we don't have like a tiny family, and we also don't have like we have a lot of demands. We've a lot of different kids, different ages. What do you think that we've done that's helped us to not completely burn out from the whole experience of parenting, or let that really detract from our marriage?
It's funny because my answer will seem kind of weird. I mean, I knew we were going to talk about this, so I was kind of collecting my thoughts. And I think one thing, which seems counterintuitive, is taking time for myself. But I think you encouraged me to do it. I think by nature, the idea of taking time for myself can feel selfish because I think there's a lot of cultural pulls now that, like, take my me time, and everyone needs 4 hours a day to make sure that and I think can go overboard. So there's a temptation to neglect, to go the opposite way. I don't matter. My time shouldn't matter. But I think taking time, a little bit of time away, actually helps me to be a better spouse, but also a better mom. And so then I don't feel as guilty. Then
Yeah,
it's like a whole cycle. So honestly, I think you encouraging me to take time, whether it's like, hey, you wanted to go to aeration every week, take it, take an hour, go get an ice cream, take a walk. Like, and I think, okay, that's great, but then I'll still have to do all the things. So I think when you step up and say, you know what, you go take a walk and I'll do this with the kids, or I'll make sure they, clean the house. That way I knew I wasn't just adding something to my plate.
yeah.
Does that make sense? So I could take the time, but then also know that you were, what I mean, an equal partner, just, you know, doing things.
Well, yeah, I think like we you have to kind of take defense. You have to like play defense for your spouse, because I think men and women sacrifice automatically in different directions. And I think like I watch you, and I feel like that if you're awake, you're attentive to either, any of the relationships that you're around, whether it's the kids or other people, but you probably aren't necessarily going to be eagerly doing something for yourself. And I think that the same thing can be true maybe for men, where like yeah, like it's a lot easier for me to just be busy, especially when you see your wife work really hard, like to just feel like
Yeah.
you have to be doing things. And then again,
But
it's
then that
weird
doesn't end up
again
good
if you
for,
look.
yeah,
What do you say?
that wouldn't end up very good for our marriage then. That's what I was thinking. Sorry, there's a little delay there.
Yeah, no.
But
Okay.
yeah, no, I don't, that when we do take that time for ourselves, then I feel like we are better spouses and we're better,
Mhm.
with our kids. So it sounds weird, but it's because then you're a whole person. And then it allows us to be more intentional with each other, with the kids and other duties like work and whatever else are.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like you got to have some pause, because when you have that pause, then you have the ability to kind of look at your life a little differently. And like
Mhm.
you said, like not be unintentional, because you only have so much time. You only have so many opportunities to do things with your children or your spouse. You really
Yeah.
don't want to fritter it away, And but I think that
Yeah.
that's hard. I mean, like just yeah, I think that people should encourage their spouse to take care of their own needs. In that way. A lot of times, I feel like I'll hear people say, "Well, I'm not getting my needs met from from the marriage," but that's like I think to your point is like that's really an individual experience. The marriage is not a self-indulgent place where I'm like, oh, I gotta get my needs met. Why are my needs? I mean, there's a lot of that, and like you said, a lot of that me stuff, and that becomes
Right.
really, I think, dangerous, right? So I think that
Right.
that's, I
The
think it's
other
an
thing
important thing.
I think that you said something that reminded me, being intentional. I think there's so many demands on life. Like we, I mean, we work. I mean, I homeschool, I teach. all these things. And then I'm still, have a bunch of kids. I have a husband, and there are things I need to do. When we started getting up earlier and be more
Yeah.
intentional with our time, I feel like days or weeks, months when we're in a good rhythm and I get up early and I do work and I pray and I exercise and I eat a healthy breakfast, I don't, now I'm ready for the day. But if I'm rolling out of bed with the kids at 7:30, now I still have to shower. I won't have time to work out. I'm probably grabbing a bagel. You know what I mean? And then I have to catch up on all that other stuff randomly during the day. Times where I could just like connect with the kids so that by the time you come home, now I haven't connected with the kids because I was busy catching up. It's like I spend all day catching up then. So it takes discipline. It's hard. I don't like getting out of bed in the morning. I never have. Which is funny. I'm not a morning person, but I have become by habit because my days are better. But when I don't do it, when I just roll with the day, I'm like, then the day takes me away. And I get to 9 o'clock and I'm like, well, now I got to do all the things that I didn't do during the day, and then I'm not going to bed early. And then it starts all over again. It's a crazy cycle. So for me, that was a big key thing to be able to be intentional about a morning routine. I mean, if you're a night person, it'd be opposite. Like instead of sitting and watching TV for 3 hours, what could you do to better set up tomorrow? I think it really depends at
Yeah.
that. But I found I can't work after 9 anymore. My brain is mush. So I'm trying to grade papers at 9:30. And I mean, I've done that. I probably am a procrastinator. I'll probably do that next year, but uh I don't it's not my best work either. And I recognize that about myself. I'd rather have a cup of coffee and grade some papers at, 6 in the morning than not try to do it
Well, I
as I'm
think that
eating dinner, changing diapers and telling the kids to get out of the room. And then you're coming the door and I'm short with you because I haven't been intentional about my time.
well, yeah, no, I think that the intentionality of the time, but then like you said, like there's things that are essential that make you a better person, and they have to be prioritized. And a lot of people, I think, they just think, well, because they seem like they're always available, that you'll get to them later. And like you
Mhm.
said, everybody's gonna be different. There are people that are some people that are like more night owl kinds of people, or their life's built more around that way. They're
Right.
going to have to tweak it. But if your priority, like you're going to have to figure out when you're going to hit these essential things. Otherwise, I don't know, for me, like if I don't do that, like then I get frustrated, like you said, but then people start to be obstacles to me getting these things done.
Right.
Versus if you've done, I think there's like a greater freedom to enjoy your life and enjoy your family, and you have more energy. And that was like a big thing. Like when we designed like the marriage program, the Hearts Renewed program, was that people really want, I think, a lot of experiences in their marriage, but they're exhausted, right? And then we were even
Yeah.
talking while we've been on this trip. It's just like, like that it's kind of a good like mark for us, I think, to see, well, how much energy do we have? Are we healthy enough to really like enjoy the life that we have? Because you can have a really great life, but if you don't have the energy, you don't experience it, right? If you have kids but you're completely exhausted or depressed, or like like whatever you have really can kind of get muted by that stress. I think that ability to have energy, I think, is a huge thing, because but people
Yeah.
sacrifice that. How come you think people, especially like moms with kids and things that are trying to do all this stuff, how come it's so easy for them to kind of sacrifice the things that give them energy?
Because there's a lot of pressing needs, especially specifically moms with kids. I mean, I might have every intention of washing my hair, but then I have a kid pounding at the door who said he just pooped and needs to be white. I mean, these are legitimate things. Sometimes
Yeah,
things are urgent, but then other
yeah,
times you're like, I'm not even going to bother because I've got too many other things to do. So I think sometimes it's see what's important, but what's necessary too. Like I think there was one Lent where I said I'm going to make boring meals, which is ridiculous. But I'm like, okay, we're having frozen veggies and plain chicken. Like it was just not I'm a foodie, so I like to do fancier things. I always serve like, a nice sauce or whatever. And if I'd have the extra time, I'd make sure I'm like, I'm gonna drop all that, simplify it, focus on healthy whole food meals. So we're feeding our family, but it doesn't have to be fancy. Like frozen food's healthy. I mean, fresh frozen veggies. And it was just different. So then a kid would come in and they weren't an obstacle. Be like, oh, get away from me. I'm making a French sauce today. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But I mean, sometimes you legit have needs. Like I need to put food on the table, but other times I had to stop and think, is this really necessary for this stage in life? Do I need to serve 3 courses and have it be a chopped fresh garlic every time? Or can I maybe make a whole salad ahead of time that'll last for 3 days? And then we have salads every dinner, but I'm not spending that time every day and I can do something different. So it was a lot of different planning ahead. I'm not organized by nature either. So it's taken me a long time to learn that one. But
Well,
I
I
had to
think,
drop my expectations and think what was most important was spending time with my family and maintaining health. But it doesn't have to be fancy.
well, and I think that, like you said, like I think that that's one of the things that we don't realize is like how like the expectations make things complicated.
Yeah.
And then a lot of ways the complications get in the way of like probably like doing the things that we need to do or the things that are actually going to feed the family or the marriage or whatnot, or even yourself. And instead it becomes something else, you know? And I think that by simplifying, like we create more space for things and figuring out like, well, what really is important because everything can't be important, right? Everything can't be important. And that's really hard. I think we have to constantly decide like what's important because if like everything's important, nothing is. It's like all of a sudden, like, you know, are our
Mhm.
kids important? Well, yeah, they are. And, you know, I think that people, I think that's one of the things that, you know, that has been helpful for us is to have constant conversations about the priorities in light of like whatever the current situation is. Because like the priorities, you know, don't really change, but how we maybe do them might change, I guess, at times, you know?
Yeah. I think it was
And,
2 ago, you had like asked me to, hey, would you go for a walk with me or whatever later? And so I'm like, sure. And then I told the kids, oh yeah, I'll do this with you, I'll do that with you. And then
mm,
I had to make sure I did it though. So I've been trying to say yes to, to the things I can. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to go for a walk with my husband, I'm going to play chess with my son. When can I do that and organize my day so that it can happen? You know what I mean? Without feeling burnt out, frustrated at doing it all. So I think we had paper plates for dinner that night. You know what I mean? Like, so, which again, it's not a
yeah, some
preferred
of the
thing.
simple.
Sometimes it just happens.
Oh yeah, I mean, because it goes back to like, well, what's the most important thing, really, or what you know, is the dishes as important as the time with people, right? And you know, and so again, like it's hard. It's figuring out how to navigate all of that and not do everything. You know what I mean? Because and you just have to accept that. I think people have to accept that there'll be limitations. There are days where you just will not be able to get everything accomplished in your mind. Everything is not going to be completed. Every task isn't going to be completed. But you have to, like you said, I think it's helpful if you have an understanding of what you're going to do today, what you want to do today. That's going to be helpful for your relationship or with your children and things like that. This is very hard. And like you said, I think when people get off track with their priorities, they start to get into this like me time kind of thing. Like it's all about me. Probably because I think like, you know, we're off balance and I think that that's hard, right? And so that's why I think like this whole time, like for us to be away, which was really hard, I think, you know, is invaluable because you get to reflect on your marriage or reflect on your family and be grateful for things because it's very hard to be grateful when you're just constantly solving the problems of family life periodically. You know, you can't think about the system when you're in it. Sometimes you have to be pulled out of it. You know,
That's a really
you
good
know. So
point. It didn't come naturally to me though. That's something that I think you taught me, but I have found that to be true. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a Caribbean vacation. I mean, that's nice, and I'll take that again. But not completing. But I mean, like
yeah,
maybe we just want to go. One of our favorite dates was like a date. Remember up there it was like half an hour
yeah,
away, and we spent the day. It was
yeah.
just, and they came back by nighttime because again we weren't able to do a big vacation, and that's fine. But it was just like you said, the time away to reflect, to step away from it. It gives you the perspective that you need to be good spouses too, and good parents. Like, what am I doing as a spouse? Like, as a wife that's good, and like, how can I prioritize our marriage? I think it's easy too to just let it. There's so many other demands, and it's easy to just kind of neglect that part. But it's really important not to. So I think taking that time is helpful to remind myself of that.
Oh yeah, like, and I think it's important. I mean, and obviously, like you said, people are not. What it's going to look like is going to be different for each person. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to look different for each person. For some people, like I said, it's going to be like an afternoon together. For other people, it might be a day trip. It might be a walk. But I think people do need to find time, like to be together and to invest in their marriage. And I think a lot of people invest in their marriage like when they're under pressure, right? Like someone's threatening them or they're burned out completely. It's kind of like if you feel like if it's like you know if you feel like oh we desperately need a vacation or we desperately need a date night. Well, you probably like again probably needed one 2 years ago, right? And again, you'll see people like people that are, I think, very dedicated moms and dads. They're very virtuous people. Like again, I think that they almost don't feel like that they're permitted to do things with their spouse, that their children should come first. And that I think is a dangerous thing. Like where a lot of people, what is your priority? And they'll say,
Many people,
all
yeah, yeah, like my children come first. Like actually, they didn't. And even if they did, like, and then you got married, like your spouse comes first. That's the sacrament. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
otherwise, it fall apart.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, and again, like your kids want to see you love each other. Like, I think that that's a big thing, and a lot of times, like people, like they're doing all of this stuff, and then they get, I think, even more exploited by their kids because they feel guilty.
Yeah,
And so I think that people need to, again, like realize, well, the priority should be my marriage. Then from that comes the ability to be close to my kids or to parent. I mean, it doesn't mean, and again, it's not all like again, it doesn't always have to look the same, right? It's not going to look the same at all seasons of life. But I think it's important because if people are, again, it's kind of like, you're not it's like if I only work out once a month, am I like really, am I kind of like a fit and active person? Probably not. But people, I mean, I think that there's a process that like we want to try to build a process so that we have more abilities to connect with our spouse and that the environment is built for connection. And that's one of the things I've seen like for us with the kids and within our kind of own relationship is just this whole idea that at least we're trying to continue to adapt to, okay, is this going to bring us all together as a family or is this going to make it harder for us to connect? Everything from, there's stuff with technology, there's stuff with work schedules, there's stuff with, the stuff our kids are doing. There's a lot of processes involved.
right. One thing we did last year for a while, it didn't work. I mean, for the summer, it didn't make sense to do, and we did other things. But like when life got busy, we stopped and we did a happy hour thing. And we stop and have coffee or a drink or whatever. Like before we started making dinner, it was like a
Yeah.
check-in thing, 3 times a week. But it wasn't
Yeah.
like a long. It was just a cup of coffee. It was
Yeah.
20 minutes. And I liked that. It gave us a solid check-in point, and that worked for us. I know some people do it after dinner or whatever, but it was like the happy hour, and it felt
Yeah.
adult like all that, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
And some
Well, I think like it's hard because a lot of times, like especially when
But we kids like, no, no, no. This is our happy hour. This is our time. And there would sometimes be kids that come up to us again with not legitimate needs, but like, hey, let me tell you about something. It's like, can you talk to me in 20 minutes? Is that something that can wait? Yes. And we're not neglecting them, but it's setting that boundary of like, okay, you're important, but my husband's important. And right now is our time, and I will talk to you
yeah,
in 20 minutes. I think there have been a few times
it's
where it's
true.
like, hey, I need a Band-Aid. That's legitimate. I'm going to go attend to that. So life happens, but at least,
It's
you
true.
know what I mean? You had this,
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that like the kids like they need to also know that they can't access you all the time
and that's hard.
because and that is hard because you
As
almost
a
feel like
stay,
you're a bad parent.
yeah,
What?
as a stay-at-home mom, that is hard because I feel like that's my job to always be available. But really, my job is to raise human beings that grow into good adults, and part of that is responding to their needs. But I don't think it's legitimate to grow up with the idea that somebody's always available to you whenever you ask either. So, but that's hard for me.
Well, it is. I mean, it is. I think that like there's always some level of guilt regardless, right? Because you can't attend to everything. So if you're not going to attend to stuff, you need to at least know why. Why are you not doing these things, right? So okay, and so we've been talking about like a lot of the need to prioritize the marriage, right? And
Mhm.
um and obviously that like we have to figure out ways to really minister to ourselves so we have the energy really for our spouse and for our kids. And sometimes like again that's going to look differently. Sometimes it's a trip away like we're doing now. Sometimes it's exercise in the morning on our own as spouses or time in holy hour. Sometimes
What?
there's going to be smaller things, smaller ways to minister to your spouse where you're just having like a daily check-in where you have coffee together, you have a glass of wine together, whatever it is that you guys do. And, but there has to be a touch point where you can kind of connect your spouse so that you have an understanding of what's going on with them. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people forget about is that realistically communication, like people always say it's like a cliche thing of like, well, you got to work on communication. Well, if you only talk to your spouse at the end of the day, right? Or you only talk to your spouse because there's a problem with a kid, or because you're having a change in the school schedule or something, or the soccer schedule, well, that's probably
Yeah.
not efficient, right? So, I
That's true.
mean,
Even like text during the day, that was kind of a big thing when we started trying to be more intentional about checking in. Or
yeah,
sometimes, be a call during the day when you can, just to, again, just like, hey, I'm thinking of you. That means a lot. There's that touch point there.
yeah. If people have the technology to shoot your wife or your husband a text, or and to communicate you're thinking about them. A lot of times people
Hmm.
will say, like, well, what does cherishing your spouse look like? Really, cherishing your spouse, I think, really has to do with being able to communicate to them that you think about them when they're not physically present, when they're not
Right.
physically around you, or they're not even accessible, right? They're away on a business trip, or they're away at work, or they're, driving kids around to the doctor all day. Like, are you thinking about your spouse? And what can you do that communicates that? But the communication is really hard, I mean, so one of the things that, I think that has been helpful that we've done when people are listening to this and thinking of practical things, I think in a lot of ways is that, like, to really, like, recurrently, like, talk about, like, the goals in lieu of, like, what is our priority, like, what is our goal for our kids, what is the function of, like, that. And like you said, we want to raise adults, we're not trying to raise kids, like, and really, I think the goals help with communication, because I know how to support you, or vice versa, you might know how to support me. But I think it's
Right.
super important. You're going to have to find a time to prioritize this when you both have the energy to be present. Because, like, again, it's
Yeah.
like, it might be 11 o'clock at night, you put the kids down, or 10 o'clock at night, but people are exhausted, and then they're not at their best. They're watching TV, or they're scrolling on their phone, or they're just too tired to function and listen to you. It's a great place to be invalidated, is like to come to your spouse with your need after all of the other. That's why I think, like, the coffee time or the happy hour thing or whatever people do is important, because it at least prioritizes it before you're super fatigued. Because, yeah, after you give
Right.
kids a bath, or you drive kids back from dance, or after you go and visit your parents, or whatever's going on in your life, are you really going to have the energy to listen to your spouse the way you normally would? And the answer is sometimes no.
Right. And some days are going to be, or we've even said some seasons are just busier. And it's like, I mean, we're looking up on volleyball season, which in our house is kind of volleyball and football in our house. And it's fall gets crazy. And it's like, okay, it's going to be busy. By 9 o'clock, I'm going to be dead. So knowing that, what can we do to prepare for that? You know what I mean? Like, what
Yeah.
can we do? Well, maybe a little differently than we're doing right now, where I'm not homeschooling, where there's no, you know what I mean? No sports right now that hasn't started, So, but just planning it, like recognizing, okay, this is going to change. It's not going to be all year. It's going to be a busy couple of months. So busy's not always bad, but we don't want to let it happen to us either. And then realize, wow, we haven't like chatted at all in 3 months, you know?
Yeah.
Unless it had to do with the playball schedule. So, there's more when you know that they're going to be busier seasons. Like, okay, that is an important goal for our kids to have something they believe in, that supports our goals as a family that we've decided. Now, so this is worth it. So how can we make it not take over and just make life about volleyball and about football? You know what I mean? Like that's not what life's
Yeah.
about, but that's an important part of our life this next couple of months. So how are we gonna fit that in a way that's not going to destroy our marriage either?
Well, I think that that's a huge component of it, and like, again, changing the expectations, knowing that this season of life, what my role is and what I should anticipate, versus just so that you can enjoy it. Because I feel like a lot of times, like, it's like you forget you're not going to be having the same abilities. Like you said, you have to change the way you operate, because, like, after work, you're going to be you're going to be at volleyball, or on Saturdays you're going to have to be. You really want to show up to your kids, and you have to be
Yeah,
aware of that, because it's not going to be accidental. You're not going to be accidentally successful at showing up for your spouse. Like, it's just very. I think that is a myth. Like, that somehow you're just going to wing it, and it's just going to, like, be okay. No, like you said,
yeah,
it'll be 4 months, and you'll be resentful, or it'll be 4 months where you're going to be upset with me because I didn't adjust my schedule, or you know what I mean. And it's easy
yeah.
just because there's the it's melee, because there's a lot of pieces that we don't control. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and then we both end up resenting each other, but we never really talked about it. But you know what helped me actually last year a lot was I'm a person, I bet there's a lot of people listening who just feel like they can't ask for help. I really have a hard time doing that. I want to feel like I can do it all. I'm super mom and I take pride in that. And I think there's a pride element too. So I had to have the humility to one day just say, I can't do it all. I can't be my kid's mom, my kid's teacher, my kid's chauffeur, my kid's sports director. I can't sit at every sports game. I think just growing up, I felt like I had to. People who didn't go to every game were just bad moms. I had to do that. You know what I mean? So follow every play, dissect it all. And I just can't do that. I could if we, you know what I mean, chose a different path, but it's just, I can't. And realizing I couldn't do it all, it also made me, I tried to do it all and I failed. And I'm like, okay, if I ask for help and hey, can you carpool with me? Can I drop my kids to you? Can you take every other Saturday off and, help me out here?
Yeah.
And I could be a better mom and I could be a better spouse because it wasn't a stress. I get to the day resentful. Like, well, I tried to do it all and I failed and now I'm miserable and I have nothing left to give you. Where,
Yeah.
it wasn't a big deal. Once I started asking for help, I realized and other people felt like they could ask me for help and then I could help them.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like, evidence, I think, like you said, there's got to be humility.
Yeah. Right. To realize I couldn't do it all.
Yeah. I think there's just got to be a level of humility to kind of manage it all, and to be honest with, like, what can I do and what can I expect? And there's nothing wrong with that with your kids, because I think kids need to be, we always say, like, you have to train your kids for reality. The reality is that you can do a lot of things, but you're not the only person that we're dealing with. There's six other people, six other things. And yeah, we love you, we'll support you, but this is the limitations of life. And I think
Right.
giving kids limitations, or I shouldn't even say giving them limitations. I think, like, understanding there will be difficulties. I can't do everything is, I think, super important to teach kids, because then it sets them up for, like, better reality and for them to be able to say no, or at least have healthy expectations. Otherwise, like, again, if I create this unrealistic experience of, oh, you can do everything, be everything,
Right.
well, that's
And it's
just
not to
that
say
that
we
that
don't do that. You know what I mean? Like we show up and, our whole family supports each other. But sometimes it's like, look, I'd love to be at this game, but I can't do that and do this other thing. So so I could either not sign you up for that activity because I can't be there, so you can't do it, or you can do it. I'll
yeah,
support you in the best way that I can. And I think your kids have seen that and they'd rather, do that. Like we have three big things coming up in a couple weeks. I said within 3 hours. Like, okay, something's got to give. I cannot be at every thing. And what's the most important? We said that one's a sacrament. We're like, well, sacrament comes first. How can we get our other kids to other things and still make sure we prioritize the sacrament?
yeah,
So that's just a really real thing that's happening in a couple weeks. And, it's like, okay, I can't be at this tournament all day and
yeah,
you can't, you know what I mean? Be at that game and or even coming on this trip, like in order to do it, it's like you had to work more. You know what I mean? Beforehand, or
yeah,
you didn't take a day off for a couple weeks, like your normal days off, and did more work. But we're like, it's okay. We know that it's not going to be the normal thing. And I mowed the lawn that week because that was, you know what I mean. So we did different things that we normally wouldn't do to support each other in that.
well, yeah, and I think that as long as people understand what the goal is, people have a better time partnering. I think that's just really true in, like, marriage, though. Is, like, at least I know what the goal is, and I think that it helps it to not be emotional, right? It's not like it doesn't take you don't take it as personal. It's kind of like, okay, well, this is what I need to do, or this is how I can support my wife, or this is what I need to do for my children.
Yeah.
Because I think there is always, like some kind of healthy level of just discomfort if you're having to develop and grow in your marriage. Like, I don't think that we are, like the same as we were when we first got married till now, in terms of, I think we've had to become more disciplined, and we've had to, like, try to figure out how to do things in a way that is, just more balanced, right? Because, trying to do everything is bad, or getting lost in one direction, or, again, having
Yeah.
these crazy expectations that I think the world sets up these weird social traps of, it's either got to look like you can't do these things with your spouse, you can't take
Yeah.
time for them, you can't, date nights are bad, or date nights are a joke. I actually want to talk about that maybe a little bit in a minute, but this whole idea, like, that, well, you shouldn't do this, you're being a bad parent because you went away and you're supposed to be with your kids 24/7. How dare you? Like, and I think that, again, I mean, if you can attend, this is a priority, and your marriage then affects your parenting, affects your ability to be a unified front with your children, that your spouse knows they're loved by you. But I think there's a big thing that I hear a lot of times too about, like, just about date night in general, because I think people have these weird false expectations, or especially people who have a lot of kids, or maybe they have financial difficulties, like, it's hard to get a sitter. it's hard. Some people are living in different cities. They don't have family support, so they got no babysitter. You know what I mean? I got people that I know that are in the military. They don't always, it's hard if you're working and
Yeah.
living transiently. Like, how do you find support to still pull this off? And I think like one of the things that we've seen over the course of our life is you just have to, there's seasons of life that obviously it's different, but I feel like, like how do you feel like the date night thing has changed over the years for us? Or like
I
what?
think it's dynamic and it continues to be. So like well, I mean, when we first got married, we didn't have a lot of money at all. And so we weren't going out doing lavish things. I don't think we took a vacation for about 5 or 6 years after. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I don't we're sitting here, yeah, we are very blessed to right now be away together in the Caribbean, but it didn't always look like that. But we had more date nights. I think, we'd either go to the movie. I remember the one time we dressed up real fancy like we went out to Jim's Steakout. We spent $20 that night.
Yeah, and for people who don't know what that is, it's like a
It's like Chick-fil-A with steak subs. So that was cool. Not sure if you could still see me. There you go. Okay, coming in. So I mean, that's like different. I mean, other times I think we did date night at home for a long time. I think we probably had 2 date nights out a year in that year, but we'd get some, apps from the store and we'd make something together. And then, went and did dancing, like this like YouTube dancing thing during COVID. I think it was during COVID. It was just being intentional, like, okay, I can't go
yeah,
out right now, but what can we do? I think that was the thing we've always asked ourselves, so that's why it's changed. Or like when we had young
yeah,
babies, sometimes we take them out we actually always did for a bunch of months, but it was not our goal was always like a monthly, like out date night. Sometimes it didn't happen for months, but instead it's like, well, what can we do? And you were always good on making sure of that something like that happened. You're like, okay, I'll stop and get some apps, or let's make a dessert and, do
yeah,
this, or
yeah, and do something at home. Well, and I think
you'd
that
also
like
play Scrabble with me, which is not your favorite game, but you knew I like Scrabble.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I've gotten a little bit better with spelling, but I still make things up. I think
I
no, I
still
think
win.
that well, you do. You are the English police, but I didn't put that in your
Beat me.
title as your wife and homeschooling mom today. You're not the English police. Good for people that we won't. No, I think that again, but it goes back to that whole idea of like, can we simplify these things so that it happens. And again, I don't think that I think that people make things too. I don't know. I think that people make things too complicated, and then it's less able to be enjoyed, and it's less able to happen, right? Because human beings, they
Yeah. I said one thing I really appreciate about our whole marriage is that I think we looked at what were our priorities even from the beginning and how can we best support them. Like
yeah,
from the minute I think we realized that when we got pregnant with her first. And we're like, well, our priority was that I'd stay home with her. But it was
yeah,
impossible, our current situation. It was where we were living, the amount of money we made, the amount of cars we had, like it was impossible.
okay,
And I think a lot of people, that's where they get stuck in that impossible. But it's like, okay, right now it's impossible, but how can we make it possible? And we did. We moved, we sold a car, right? You
yeah,
found a different way to bring in extra money, and there we go. And we did. And I stayed home, and it evolved, and I've taken different jobs and done different work throughout then. But that was I think, a big lesson for us. Like, okay, it's not how can we make it work? And I think that's just been a
yeah.
common question in our marriage.
Hold on. Hold on. Yes, they found your purse. Thank you very much. Yeah. Um. Yeah, that's important, right?
And so is
That
keeping
was
track of your belongings when you're in Mexico. So, sorry.
yeah. Good. Hold on. Okay. Well, I think that's a big deal, though. Is like you said, the
Telling me
prioritization.
I have no data for this recording. My phone keeps
Yeah.
yelling at me.
So we're
So
just gonna
maybe we should
we'll pause.
wrap it up.
Okay. Okay, and welcome back, guys. This is our final segment. We obviously had the power run out, I think, on our devices out on the beach. So we want to kind of give you kind of a less disrupted end to the program. And so as we just left off, a minute ago, we were talking about how, you got to find ways to make things happen, right? It's important that, like, yes, you're going to have obstacles to connecting with your spouse. You're going to have obstacles to maybe being able to go to date night or any number of things. But there's always, we want to take this mindset that we can make things happen. And I know Shan, you were saying like how like we just really like it was a priority, and so we really
Mhm.
pivoted, and there was like a level of sacrifice. There were things that we did to ensure it, like we talked about, like, changing, the way that we, looking for ways to make money, selling the car. We even changed where we were living, really, because we had an idea, like we had this idea of like the image of the kind of marriage that we, that we wanted and things, and the way that we wanted to spend our time. For people that are going to be listening to this, what do you think it is that really, has been the benefit of that prioritization of time with your spouse, or that ability to kind of, like we've talked about on the episode so far, even blocking time, prioritizing that time. Like, what do you think is one of the big, the big benefits of that?
I think for me, when we do block out time together, I feel more connected to you. It all just becomes easier. And I know the opposite's true when we don't, whenever there's tension,
Yeah.
like everyone around us feels it. Like everything seems to just be harder. Like, home life, work, like everything. So I feel like when we're good, a lot of things are good. So when we feel connected, it just I don't know, it really is a top down thing, and it sounds silly sometimes and too easy, but I just feel like the connection is just, that part of the intimacy is important.
No, and I think it's important because I think sometimes, like for me, my mind goes to work and goes to like a lot of external things. And for
Yeah.
me to feel valued as your husband, I think sometimes if I'm always busy or always working or always doing things, I think sometimes I can miss out on the fact that, oh, my wife cares about me, or oh, these kids care about me, because I can always just be other places.
And it's
But
easy for me to run in to-do lists in my head and everything like that too. So I think we both just need to realize the value of, slowing down. That was my phrase this year was just slow down. Look at who's around you, just slow down. And I really try to do that. I don't do it great, but when I do slow down, it does make a difference.
yeah. Well, I think that it's a huge thing to slow down and to have those practices of trying to, like those times to, to know that I'm not going to go at the same speed. And I mean, I think I can tell like when I'm going too fast because then I am frustrated, right? Or then, and everything, like you said, I think that's the best way to describe it. Everything gets harder. Everything becomes harder. And I think the intentionality breaks down because you're not actually, you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You also don't know what, I think people don't know what, like, what the goal is that their spouse has. I mean, when we have that online resource, what is it, the family culture download? I think when we did, a version of that, to sit down and really outline these areas of priority in our life, where are we being successful? Where are we maybe falling short? Like, because sometimes like we don't talk about all of these things. And again, if there's no time to really, get ahead of it, I think a lot of times people, you're always playing catch up. But if you have that regular time, like where you're connecting and you prioritize it, like you at least are in tandem or at least in sync with your spouse, where you don't feel like you're having to play catch up. Like I think a lot of people are like, well, what does my wife think about this? Or what does my husband think about this? But I think sometimes the truth is that people don't actually ask that question at all. And I mean, I don't necessarily think like, oh, what does my wife think about this necessarily? You know what I mean?
Right.
But I have more of an idea of how she's going to feel about things because I've spent more time with her. And as soon as I'm, not spending time with my spouse, I feel like it's more possible that I'm going to hurt you or I'm not going to recover well from something in the sense that, oh, I screwed up and I scheduled this in the wrong day, or I screwed up, and I have to rearrange something, or didn't handle something correct. I can recover better if I have a closeness with you, right?
Right, because on the flip side too, if that happens and like the schedule thing, oh, I messed up and I scheduled this. Well, I know that there's a shared goal. I know why you scheduled that. You know what I mean? I know you were being intentional when you did it. Or I feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this might not be in line with our family goals. Are you sure this is what you want to do? You know what I mean? And vice versa when we do things like that. We can keep each other in line, but also be more understanding if we do, you know what I mean, go one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is I have a greater compassion and a sensitivity to like the needs of my wife, or like in your situation, like my needs, like, well, what does Dan think about these things? Not that these things can be like mitigated. It's not like, oh, you're going to cater to me or that I have to cater to you so much as I should be thoughtful. I think it's very hard to
Right.
be thoughtful to your spouse if you're just kind of like, okay, well, I don't see her, or I don't see him because I'm always working, or I get home and and she's always putting a kid down, or it's always like melee, right? And I think it's very hard. Because,
Sometimes it is.
yeah, well, it is, and I think one of the key things
I
that
think too. Like I think that's important to acknowledge too, because life does get really crazy. But like you said, there's times where it's like, okay, we'll sit down. Like this is a crazy time, you know. So it's not
Mhm.
always perfect.
No, it's yeah, it's not always perfect. I think that like what has really made it a lot. I think what really changed our communication or some of our intentionality was being deliberate about sleep. Like really being very, I think, deliberate about sleep because I feel like the better we sleep, the better our sleep rhythm or that routine of sleep, the better we can attend to each other. But
Yeah.
as soon as that's shot, like we really, you know what I mean, where people are like not sleeping at the right times or they're sleeping in, right? You start to miss each other, right? You try to, I tell people like it's really hard for those people that are listening to this and they have shift work. That's really hard because your spouse is up and then you're asleep or vice versa. But I think that the better that you sleep, the better that you can communicate too, you know?
You know what? And on that, I really that just reminded me of like maybe I don't know back 12 years ago when we were still in Buffalo. Just I feel like from the beginning of our marriage, we really tried to go to bed together, and
Hmm.
I kind of came naturally to us. It wasn't something I don't think we really said, okay, got to go to bed together. And it was really, and I wouldn't say it's not 100%. I mean, there are times I go to bed before you, and times you don't go to bed. But I want to say probably really 6 days a week. Is that about fair? Like maybe
Yeah, yeah,
five.
yeah, yeah. So,
We
yeah,
we
most of the
we do that together. Like, and if one of us is staying up, it's like, why? And sometimes there's a valid reason, like, you're working late or like it's girls' night or, you know what I mean? It's something, I mean, there are, times like that. We don't do everything together, but it's just become a core part of our marriage. And I guess I've come to realize not everybody does that, but I think really that's kind of helped us sync up in that way in general.
Yeah, I think that yeah, because again, like that, those behaviors, I think whatever we're doing feeds the kind of person that we want to be, you know. And I think that that's the thing, like you know, that at one point, you know, we talked about like the Mother's Rule of Life, which is that book that I think you read and then I read, even though I'm not a woman, but I did read most of the book. But
You
one of the
did.
things that and I will put that in the show notes if people want to pick it up. I encourage any woman any mother to read that. I think that that's a very helpful book, but even men. But one of the things from that is to make the decision of whatever you're doing in your life to appraise it and say, well, does this help me to be a better husband and father? Does this make me a better wife and mother? And if it doesn't, then you have to figure out, do I have to edit this? Like, how do I have to change this? Or do I just discard it, right? It's like no longer helpful, right? The stuff that I'm doing, you know, maybe you used to play, you know, hockey at 10:30 at night when you were 21, but now you're 40 and you're not going to be playing hockey till 1 a.m. because you wake up and now your wife has to do everything and put all the kids on the bus and cook everything and do everything and you sleep until 8 and then you
Right.
scramble out the door and now she resents you, right? So again, it's maybe not helping you. And so this can be for anything. I feel like that was a really profound kind of way to appraise stuff is, does this really help me in these core vocations as a husband, as a father, as a wife, and as a mother? And I think you've even brought that up. You're like, well, does this really help you to become a good husband and father? I'm like, and sometimes I got to say like, not really. Right. So or it's just a time suck. Like it's really not, it's not like it's evil, but it's also not
Just
really
might
gonna
not be
be
good for right now, for me, for you, for our family.
yeah, and I think that that helps, and the more that you have the communication with your spouse, I think it gets rid of a lot of the need to make all these decisions on your own and freak out and get stressed. It's kinda like, "Oh, me and my wife have this goal, we wanna have this type of life, and so if I have like, if we know how to make decisions more quickly, we don't have to be as stressed." And so I think that that's one of the key things to reduce the amount of stress. Because, like you said, like having kids or having a life and like living life and trying to do it correctly, or I guess trying to have a full life is complicated. And success in life, I mean, and what I mean by that is just like you know, the longer you live, the more, maybe the more property you have, or, you know, for you, you get more farm animals or whatever it is. There's more complexity, right? And then there's more decisions you got to make, and I think that the more that you build habits that support your vocation, if you have habits that support your vocation, you don't have to make as many decisions. You just know, okay, I got to pick up this chicken feed. Okay, I got to mow the lawn, or I got to teach my son to mow the lawn, or I got to make sure that I ask my wife when I go to the store, like if she needs anything. These seem like small things, but they save a lot of energy. And then you're not having to waste your time on things because, the work that you're doing, the way that you spend your time, the way that you make decisions supports your vocation. So I think that that is a huge thing. So maybe asking, if you're listening to this again, is what you're doing, the way you're doing it, does it support you as a husband and father? Does it support you as a wife and mother? And if it doesn't, then you really got to figure out either a new way to do it, or maybe it's time to maybe go in a different direction. So this has been
Right.
like, again, like, a great conversation. Is there anything that you did want to say before we peace out with this episode?
I think we really covered it all. You've been very thorough.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you are the hidden partner and the secret genius of our family life. So at least
I know. I usually like to stay hidden. So
yeah,
she's
well, not anymore. So well, I do appreciate you being a part of it today, and hopefully next time, like, we can talk a little bit about. I think we had a request at somebody that we talk a little bit about homeschooling. So I'm gonna
yeah.
bring you back for that. Okay. So
Yeah.
I will see you. I'll see you in a minute. So yeah, I'll see you out of the studio. But you guys, if you can, go out and share this with anybody that you think might benefit in their marriage or family life, whether they're newly married or whether they've been married for a long period of time. And and if you haven't taken a look at that family culture download, I encourage you to take a look at it. Sit down with your spouse, have that conversation, so you get rid of some of these that need to make all these decisions and need to go through all these arguments. You can just have a conversation with your spouse about what you want it to look like and start designing the marriage that you want intentionally, like Shannon was saying. Like, it's got to be deliberate. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you in a week.
All right.
Okay.